Okay, over to you, Gary.
Okay, guys. Welcome to the Level 1-2 Bridge Series. This is the Who You Are element of it. So what we did, we sent you out this slide. Hopefully everybody got this slide. Just around self-reflection. So if you think back to your last coaching session, this is your first opportunity of populating the chat box. Think about your last coaching session. I know for most of us that will be a long time ago now. If somebody was walking past that session, what message would it have sent out to that person walking past? What message would you want it to send out? And if you think about the content of that session, what would you keep from it and what might you change? And the last question, which I think is a good question for everybody to ask themselves whenever they're doing a session, is if you was a young player taking part, would you enjoy it? And if you would enjoy it, why? And maybe if you wouldn't enjoy it, why? So just a bit of self-reflection to start the session with. We'll leave it a couple of minutes for you to populate a chat box, and it'd be interesting to see what sort of input we get. Lawrence and Andy, if you can just feed back as to what anybody might be populating a chat box with, that'd be really interesting.
Yeah, sure, we'll do. So first comments come through from Dan Worthington. He's just mentioned in terms of his sessions and what it might have said to someone who's passing by, that it's professional, organised and fun.
Okay, cheers for that, Dan.
Pleasure.
Danny Headford's also commented and just mentioned he said it would have looked organised, if not a little busy.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, it's a good thing.
So Ben Pratt's come back. Thanks, Ben. That the players had smiles on their faces and were enjoying it. Good to hear.
Excellent.
And then Phil, thanks, Phil. With people passing, I see the organisation and level of detail we go to creating a safe, fun environment.
Cool.
So Mohammed's just added he coaches at White Star, and he said it would be, or it would have looked a bit messy, but also engaging and fun.
We like messy. It's good. Andrew Hollands, thank you. I would enjoy one of my sessions as a player, as I don't have players queuing. Oh, he's disappeared there. As I don't have players queuing or waiting for their turn. Everyone is involved, and I've laid it out to move straight into the next activity. Andrew, be interesting, perhaps not necessarily share right now if that's the way it's always been, or if that's something that's taking you time to get to that stage, because I'd say that's certainly something that we'd be looking for.
So
has anybody shared anything to say that they might not have enjoyed part of their session, or they would change something and a reason why they might change it yet? Has anybody been brave enough yet? Who's gonna be the first one if nobody's done it yet?
Quite positive at the moment, which is good.
I mean, there's a theme of enjoyment at the moment, which is could be interesting to know, guys, which age groups you may be working with. But yeah, a good theme of enjoyment at the moment, and fun. Danny Headford's also mentioned that he enjoyed it himself as a coach, which I think is important if you're enjoying your own sessions in terms of delivering.
So Mark, thanks Mark. So it would have looked a bit chaotic to an outsider, but very busy as everyone is involved. I'm aware that you work with quite young ones, so I think that's fantastic. Good to hear. Andrew Hollands, thanks again. It took me at least 2 years to change my way of thinking. Before that, I was training my players as I was trained 25 years ago. I think you'll be in a similar. Yeah, I think you'll be in a similar boat to quite a lot of people. That's quite a regular one that we hear on courses as well. Honest of you, and it's good to hear.
And similar to myself as well.
Yeah, should be a journey, shouldn't it?
Okay, just give it a few more seconds, and then we'll move on. I'm gonna flip it and ask a question. In one of your last sessions, what was you most disappointed with? Make it a bit more concise.
You're reflecting yourself there, Gary, aren't you?
Always.
You're not in action.
Carry me across. Any others coming, guys?
So Nick's just added, so a young player, fun non-stop, different activities, no, not too much running for me. Danny's then said, I set a complicated session that I'd planned in detail, but was clearly wrong for the conditions and the boys. I'm there to help. Thanks for that, Dan. There's a few more coming in now, Gary.
That's what I'm looking for.
I'll pick up this next one then, Lawrence. So somewhat structured, detailed and fun. Was with our open age ladies, different levels of ability. One of the new drills I tried was slower and not successful as I would have liked, but the rest of the session ran smoothly. Thanks for that.
Good.
So Ben's just added Ben Pratt from his earlier comment. So just he realised that he was using jargon that the players didn't understand. So that could be a common theme. Just thinking about the terminology maybe that you use with your players, and whether that's suitable for their age group. Mark Gordon has mentioned talking too much and also being nutmegged by a 5-year-old as he was doing it.
That's a positive.
Yeah. At least they're able to try that. Andy Carter, so he said he misread challenging a player returning from an injury on his birthday. He was a defender who I was looking to challenge into a midfield position. Upon reflection, he took time out to apologise to him at the next session.
Good stuff.
Good.
Nick's just added as well that some parents treat it as daddy daycare, which I think we can all relate to.
Without doubt. Okay, good, excellent. Thanks very much for that, everybody. I just wanted to gauge, the types of things we've been doing and the types of reflection that maybe we have as well, and what sort of sessions we put on. I listened to a webinar today with a guy called Stephen Rolnick, who's South African, and he talks about motivational interviewing. And one of the things he was talking about, and I related it to coaching sessions, was the 6 C's. So what he tries to do, he tries to take away or remove the clutter of a session, tries to remove the cleverness. We might think we're clever by doing certain things, but it might not be beneficial for the players. And also the complexity. So maybe we make things really complex because we think about it sometimes to great degrees, but do our players need that, in their life, depending on their age and abilities, obviously. So it's all subjective. But then the 3 C's that he would include into his sessions were: he'd like to make people curious, he'd like to make sure that people are calm, and also show people that he cares about them. And I thought that was really, really relevant, and it really resonated with me, to be perfectly honest. And I thought that's coaching as well. I don't know if you agree with that, Andy, Lawrence, and if anybody else wants to comment on that, feel free to comment on that. Any thoughts, guys, from yourselves?
Let's just look at the chat here, Gary. Just to add to the end of that first bit, Mohammed just came in and just said about overly detailed session that I realised wasn't suitable for the players in his age group under 10.
So clutter, complexity.
Yeah.
Going back to those C's that we might take out of our session sometimes, depending on age and ability. Okay, so good. Hopefully the outcomes for this evening, everybody, being able to consider what our coaching philosophy is, if we've got one, and how your behaviours impact on this. Reflect on the impact of coaching philosophy on learning, the environment that we create, our practice and our player development. Reflect upon the core values and beliefs and how these shape our coaching, which they certainly will, and taking that into game situations as well. So again, I've got 3 questions to start with, and what I'll do, I'll maybe think about these questions, everybody, and you can start to populate as well if you like, or you might just want to ponder these questions. But whilst you're doing that, I'll just give a little bit of maybe when I started as a novice coach, and did I have a philosophy? Did I not have a philosophy? How did I start coaching? So really, I think when I started coaching and maybe got my first job, I was assisting somebody else. So it might be as a real novice coach, I didn't really know what to do. So it might be that person who sort of mentored me and took me under their wing, first of all, told me what to do, because I didn't have a clue. I had my own ideas, but they more than likely weren't really good coaching ideas. So I actually respected the other person's opinions at that time, and did what they wanted. So I was sort of putting some combs out and organising a couple of kids and things like that, and gradually got integrated into it. Then it may be, as time went on, I was given a little bit more license to do stuff, because you show maybe that you can do some stuff, and then gradually you're given more and more responsibility, and in that time you start to think about how you might do things, and some things you agree with and some things you might not agree with, and you may well consider that you might do it slightly different if you was overseeing that. But I think with regards philosophy itself, I didn't have a clue what that was. If somebody said to me, "What's your philosophy?" wouldn't have had a clue. I wouldn't know what that person was asking me, because I wouldn't understand what that was. And it's more likely not until the last 8-9 years that I've started to consider a philosophy and why I do things, and the way that I like to work with players, and the way that I want to try and develop players. And do I want to develop players, or do I want to win? And certainly when I first started coaching X amount of years ago, and as you can see by the lines on my face, it was a few years ago, I think that I was all about winning football matches, because I perceived that that's what a coach was meant to do, and more likely that's what my ego told me to do, because that makes me seem a good coach. So I don't think that, and when I did start to develop a philosophy, my philosophy now is different to when it started off being my philosophy, because it is flexible. And I would say that in 5 years' time, my philosophy will be slightly different again. And there's no reason why it shouldn't be, because we'll gain more information. So that's where I'm coming from, and that's my sort of stab at philosophy. But we'll go into a little bit more detail as we go on. So if you've had to think about those three questions. So what is a coaching philosophy? Have you got a coaching philosophy? And how is your coaching philosophy shaped? Has anybody populated any information in there, guys?
Not just yet. I was just thinking, Gary, it might be a good time, just because they maybe had a little bit more time to think about it than others, for Andy or Martin just to briefly share, maybe just kind of top end some of their thoughts around philosophy, if that's all right.
Yeah. Okay. So Andy or Martin or both, if you can give me or us two things that maybe shaped your philosophy, that'd be great. But I don't want you giving everything away.
Go on, you go first, Mark. Put you on the spot.
Carl, you certainly have there, mate. Thank you.
Sorry.
That's a challenge.
Yeah. You take the warm up.
I think initially, Gary, I'd agree with what you said in terms of how the philosophy was shaped. It was in terms of, that desire to, one, to try and work out what the hell you're trying to do as a coach, but ultimately you want to win. So I think that was probably before the FA became involved in anything that we were doing. But then once we got started on the pathway with the level 1 and involved with our FA mentor Ian Fleming, then the whole club started to look at what's our philosophy, what is it we're looking to do as a club, and then that really started to sort of filter down into each of us as coaches. And the type of club we are is one that we look at players of all ability, all levels, and really just want to have be a positive club and role in the local community. So big emphasis on fun, enjoyment, development, and appropriate playing time for all of our players. So that's certainly at the core of everything that we're now looking to do as a club, and also me personally as a coach. Andy, anything you want to chip in on top of that, mate?
Yeah, probably. I think my background getting into football wasn't because I'd played it, and I think as I reflect on that plays a big part in my philosophy and my motivation. I wasn't good enough to play, apparently, when I was a kid. Grassroots was a very, very different thing, sort of 30, 40 years ago, and I went to a trial at a local club and I wasn't good enough. So I think part of my philosophy is trying to create an environment that doesn't subject that kind of rejection to other kids today.
Yeah.
So I over the course of the level 2, I've come to appreciate that what I thought was a hindrance to begin with, that I couldn't play football, that I wasn't good enough, and football, and even grassroots football, is full of alpha males, and they're very dominant and they're very shouty, a lot of them, and I'm not. And what I've come to appreciate, and it's interesting, Martin mentioned Ian as well, that our club mentor, he was instrumental in a lot of this, was that actually there's a place in youth football for a continuum of different reasons, including if it's balanced right, the winning, but also, more importantly for me, there was a place for my philosophy as well. And there's now a self-confidence that's coming out of that says, you know what, people are going to align with my philosophy if it suits them, and I don't necessarily have to change because of that. But certainly the lack of playing and the lack of opportunity that presented itself to me has been something that's been core to my philosophy along the way.
Yeah, and I can imagine that sort of resonated very strongly with you as well. And thanks for sharing that, Andy and Martin.
No problem.
I think certainly from my point of view, I mean that's a terrible thing, terrible story to hear, that a child goes along to a grassroots football team to play football and is deemed not competent to play football, which is absolutely ludicrous. But it goes back to, I suppose fortunately now we've got so many different levels of grassroots children's football that there should be a place for everybody. And maybe it wasn't as prevalent then. However, it still doesn't make it right. The thing I always go back to is that we're not, most of us on this webinar are not going to be developing a player who goes and earns a living playing football. If we're totally honest with ourselves, we'd like to aspire to that, but very few of us will. So if we're not developing that type of person, we're developing somebody who has to go out into the world and work. And we can teach individuals those life skills within a football environment. That's the message that I think football should bring to development of children. I don't want to get on a soapbox and start preaching things, but that's where I come from on this now. Anybody that wants to play any sport should be able to play it. And quite rightly, there's different levels, but there should be a level for everybody's level of ability. Okay, I'll stop there. Anybody populated the chat box at all, guys?
There's been loads coming in,
Yeah,
Gary.
Let's have some.
We'll take a few sort of the earlier ones, and we may pick up some of the others towards the end. So just maybe a couple each on there, Lawrence. So Ben Pratt, in its basic sense, I think your philosophy is shaped by what you think is important and the principles that you hold. It's also shaped by what the players want. So there's obviously a bit of background and beliefs for you as an individual. Ben,
Andy?
Ben Pratt, that one.
Ben, that's excellent. Excellent.
Really good. Nice that obviously a nod there to the individuals that you're coaching. I think that's
very
probably
much so.
It's a huge part. Mark, thank you. So a set of values of how you like to coach, your objectives with the players, why you're doing it, which is huge, and how you like football to be played or the preferred result.
So Danny Headford's commented again. So just saying that his philosophy is twofold. Comes down to how you see the game and how you want to share that with your players, which I think is a really valid point. He's gone on to mention he's working hard to get his kids to enjoy the game and want to improve. He wants to do that by having them playing what he perceives to be good football. And his philosophy is shaped by those he admires and those he's watched help his kids rather than those who have coached him. So quite an interesting point. Max has mentioned that since beginning his level 2, he's really started to think about his coaching philosophy and he started to try and begin to shape it. So it's interesting that obviously starting the kind of level 2 journey has brought that upon him. He's since been putting some thoughts and principles down on paper, which is actually quite a difficult task if it's not something that you've done before or it's not something that you've considered before, to actually start to formulate those ideas and put them down on paper. Be interesting to know where you've got to with that, Max, and kind of what you've got so far.
Yeah, well done, Max.
So just in terms of time, Gary, there's a few more, so apologies if it got to everyone, but
we're behind time already.
just thinking ahead to some of the gems that are coming up, Gary.
You know that time management is not my strong point.
That's all right. Me and Lawrence are here to help you out. It's fine. So we'll just finish with one here. So Mohammed says, I would say my coaching philosophy is to develop players that have an environment that encourages players on and off the pitch. This is due to me coaching with my foundation phase players. That plays a massive part of my philosophy. Also to give great opportunities for a place or pathway into pro academies and to give all abilities a chance in the game.
Excellent.
Just as we've had one there, Gary.
Well, the last one. Right?
I was just going to say, just as we've had one there, that's a bit of a question. So I don't know if he was interested in maybe just answering a quick question. So Nick Martins just mentioned he agrees with what you're saying, that every child should be able to play. He mentions about the right level. So what are your views on A, B and C teams within a club? As he feels that if they're not put at the right level, it could turn them off of playing football. So what are your thoughts around A, B and C teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there'll be there'll be A, B, C's, there'll be 1, 2, 3s, there'll be first team, second team, third team, Panthers, Jaguars, Lions, whatever else teams are called now, red, white and blues. Everybody knows who maybe the better players are and the lesser players are. And then we might have players who don't get into either team, but that's not a problem because they can still play football. And I think it's going back to one of the points that was made earlier about egos. Now, sometimes it's coaches' egos, but sometimes it's parents' egos, and they want their son or their daughter to play at the best level, irrelevant of whether they feel they're good enough or not. I think the question is, what's best for that child? So if it's best for that child to play in the C team because they're not as good as somebody else yet at their stage of learning, then by all means they play in that team and they can still strive to get better. If a player is a very good player, then that doesn't mean they're a very good player in all aspects. So they might still have to strive to get better in certain aspects of the game. It might be they're in that team because they're good technically, but it doesn't mean that their holistic development is overall that first team player. They might be very poor at decision making. They might not be as committed as the player in the C team. I think it's just about finding a level where children do enjoy themselves. And I think maybe, I suppose, utopia for me would be we could go up and down teams. So if we're striving, if we're forging ahead and doing really well, we might then get a lift up to the next team. Equally, if the players, striving to keep up in another team, they've got the opportunity to drop down. But I know that's not feasible because we've got leagues and rules, etc., which I'm no expert on and don't profess to be or want to be, which maybe put obstacles in the way. I don't know if that answers that question by any stretch of the imagination at all or not, but that's just my feelings on it. Hello?
Sorry, Gary, I'd muted myself. Excellent.
Yes, everybody sleeping.
No, there's a few more bits that have come through just around players' philosophy, coaches' philosophies. I don't know if you're keen to move on to your next part. We can always come back to some of these points.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I'd say, Lawrence, I'll take one more in a minute. The one thing I'd say is this is purely objective. Now, we may have somebody on the webinar who's going, I don't actually agree with that because I work with a senior team and we want to win games. And that's not a problem at all. Not a problem at all. As long as we're still catering for the needs of the players. And I mean, personally, I don't care whether people are working in the foundation phase or the development phase or the professional phase, adult football. If you're a coach, it's still about the development of those players and making those players as good as they can possibly be. So even if our objective is to win games, our primary objective should still be to develop players to the best of their ability. So I just wanted to cover that off as well, because I know we may have people who are working in older age groups, and I would argue the case that somebody who's 21 is still developing as a player.
Just looking at the sign-ups for this, Gary, is actually quite a good mix of all age phases.
Excellent.
A smattering of those that are working in senior football as well. So it's good to have that. There's plenty of variety coming through.
And not everybody's going to agree with what I'm saying,
Yeah.
And nor should they, because it is all about opinions. But I'm just thinking about the development of players and so I listened to somebody the other day, and they was a senior player, played a very, very good level, and the coach never ever asked them what they would do in this scenario. If they was challenged in this way, what would they do as a player? And I found that quite frightening, because they'd always just taken instruction off of the coach and followed instructions. Therefore, in my view, negating their ability to think for themselves, which is quite sad, because what we extol the virtues of now is to try and put on practices where players are making decisions, players are problem solving. But senior players in the past have never had to do that, sadly.
Mm.
Shall we move on?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Do you want me to take one more, Lawrence? You had one burning one there or not?
Well, there's just a few. I mean, there's some really good comments, and there's too many to mention. But I'll just finish with Kevin Ward, who's just mentioned that every player's learning curve is different, but they should all still have the same opportunity, which I think is a really valid point.
Yes.
It kind of summarises really that everyone will be slightly different, and all of your players will be different in their own way, and they'll all have their own learning curve. But as long as you're providing those opportunities, and as long as there's a place for them to play football, that's a good start.
I think a lot of the questions or the observations that may be coming up now, Lawrence, and you can tell me and Andy if it's the case or not. In the future, we're going to be doing the future player and how we support. Now, I would imagine that a lot of questions and a lot of observations would fit into that workshop. Would you say that's right, guys?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think if we just park that for a minute, and then hopefully people will revisit on a subsequent workshop later on, and we can cover that in more detail.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, is that all right?
Perfect.
Super stuff. Okay, so a couple more questions there. You can populate the box, but I'm going to put a slide up in a minute as well. So which people, now they may be managers, they may be coaches, they may be somebody else, have had the most impact on you as a player? Could be a person. I'll open it up to a person as well. So you the player, you the person, or you the coach. What experiences have influenced you along the way? I go back to the clip of film, and if there's anybody on this webinar that hasn't seen the Ian Wright clip with the teacher, then I'd suggest that you Google it, YouTube it, because it's so poignant. And this is a guy that had a massive influence on Ian Wright's life, for want of a better word, and subsequently his career, and sort of getting back on the rails. So I had a teacher like that as well, and I always mention on courses who influenced me and who I would like to be, and it would be the person who I inspire to try and do well, who I spark a curiosity and a flame under, for them to have a passion for football and sport in general. It's all too easy to quash those aspirations, those interests, by the way that we behave sometimes, if we're not careful. And it may be we do that not knowing and unconsciously. And I think that's why we have to be very careful. So just going back to those two questions, which people might have influenced you and had the most impact on you as a player and a coach? And some have really impacted on me, and some haven't, but that's helped me as a coach. And what experience have influenced you along the way? So we can continue to populate that box as we go on. So I've got a slide of different coaches and leaders, and I'd like you to give some thoughts on this. So I've picked a few different sports, a few different nationalities, and lots of them have got different characteristics. I think that everybody on this webinar will more likely have a favourite, and they'll have somebody on there who's their least favourite. I'd like to think everybody knows everybody that's on there, so I've put somebody from American football basketball, rugby, obviously football. And one person on there, the guy in the top right, John Wooden, has really sort of impacted on me. And that's not really as a coach, I suppose, as a coach, but not because of his X's and O's coaching. And I've got a couple of slides later on to, if you don't know who he is and what he's done, a couple of slides to give an overview of his career, if you like, and the principles that he instilled in his players and his ethos around the way that he wanted to develop players as well. So yes, it was about playing basketball, but it was the messages that he wanted to give people through the vehicle of basketball, and it really resonated with me. So think of those coaches, stroke leaders on that slide. Who would be your favourite coach on there, and why? And if you're a Man United supporter, don't just pick Alex Ferguson. And if you're a Liverpool supporter, don't just pick Jurgen Klopp. And I know, everybody, that there are so many other people I could have put on there who are inspirational and excellent coaches, but I didn't.
I think, Gary, whilst people are having a think,
Right.
Peter from Jets,
Yes.
under sevens, said my football coach in my teens, who believed in me and gave me opportunity to play on a high level league. I think the word that just stands out there is opportunity.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
Thanks, Peter.
That coach obviously gave him the opportunity because he saw something in him and knew that he would be able to deal with that higher level football as well. So it's a two-way thing, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to some of these answers.
I think a few might be trying to do it on their phones.
Some might be Googling.
Yeah.
Any come through yet, guys?
Yeah, just had one. So Dan Worthington, from that list, Jose Mourinho. So shows you don't necessarily have to have played the game at a high level to be a good coach. I'd 100% agree with that, but then I would agree with that as a personal bias because never really played the game at any great standard. But I think it's a great point. And it's, you can come at it from different angles. And I think a lot of these people, just from my own angle, they jump out because they're good with people. I think that's just the main thing, isn't it? So that was Dan. And then Danny Hedford said, Wenger is the person I admire the most. And despite being an Arsenal fan, that's not why. I thought he was an honest and respectable man who stuck to his principles and philosophy, regardless of the fact he knew it would not bring instant success.
Yeah, agreed. I think the great thing about those people on there, there's so many different characters and they come from so many different backgrounds, experience, playing careers. They've got different personalities. I don't think that we see. So I'll give you my view of Mourinho. I admire Mourinho immensely for what he's achieved. I know full well that behind the scenes he's not the person that he shows in public. Because if he was the person he shows in public, he wouldn't have had the success he's had. So I know that, and he's a very clever man because he puts on a different persona for different situations. So he's a very, very clever man as well. I suppose his public persona I don't particularly like after saying everything I've just said. But I don't feel that that's actually the real him, if you like. Who else have we had?
Philip Cook mentioned Clive Woodward,
Yeah.
and just said he didn't have the background in rugby, but used his management skills and philosophy to lead a team. So another point there on maybe not having a specific background to the sport or a professional background. Kevin Ward's mentioned he's a West Ham supporter, but he likes Klopp, and mainly for the way that he makes his players feel as in part of a family. So obviously, Klopp's got something really good going on at Liverpool. There's a real kind of a real buzz around the way that he supports these players and the way that they kind of are together as a unit. So good point there from Kevin.
I think with Klopp you get what you see. I think he's got a great relationship with the players. I don't think that his smiley face exists 100% of the time. He's got to have a bit of edge to him. He's got to have a harder side to him, and he's got to be a disciplinarian within that structure as well. Otherwise, it wouldn't happen. But I think that he's a very genuine, honest person as well.
Just on Klopp, there's a few that have mentioned. So Mark mentioned his warmth towards his players, and you do feel that every time you see. You can't help but have a bit of a smile when you sort of see him, and if you've seen more kind of in-depth interviews with him, I think that just comes across in leaps and bounds. And then another one that's mentioned that same thing really about Klopp. So Craig D, relationship with the players and attention to detail. Yeah.
And the same thing regarding Mourinho. I mean, when Mourinho left Inter Milan, there was players in tears, weren't there, at the gates. Now, if he wasn't a likeable person and a person that the players absolutely adored, there wouldn't be that reaction from players. There wouldn't be anybody at the gate. Anybody mention Ferguson?
Yes. So Andrew Hollands mentioned about Alex Ferguson, and just said that without doubt that's his inspiration in coaching, based on his philosophy about expressing yourself for his players, discipline and working hard. And Andrew's also mentioned about there's a documentary on Netflix that's worth watching. He's also a West Ham fan.
Yeah, I've watched the Ferguson documentary. It's excellent. And also there's a programme on which was quite interesting. He works in partnership with Harvard University now. And a lot of people might not know this anyway. But Harvard University have employed him to talk about leadership and the sort of the dynasty, if you like. I mean, people say Man United, people say Ferguson, because of what he produced there and the amount of times he rebuilt sides, the amount of times he got rid of people when they was coming to the end of their time, or he could sense that maybe they didn't. But also he had an empathy with players as well. His production or the process he put in place to produce young players was incredible as well. The structure that he put in place and the caring nature that he showed for youth team players, nurturing youth team players through knowing everybody's name, knowing the tea lady's name, all goes towards creating that culture. What about Guardiola?
There's a couple of mentions of Guardiola. Let's have a look. I don't know if have you noticed any, Andy?
No, I'm just trying to sift back through. There's been plenty of interaction.
Last year's coach.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
Just Craig's just mentioned there as a big NFL fan, I guess that is. Got to give Belichick a mention. To be successful for as long is nothing short of incredible.
No, agreed.
A lot of support for Cruyff as well. Just about his whole philosophy and developing a style of play. So Martin King mentions about the the style of play that still inspires now, or has inspired so much. A few mentions of Cruyff, actually.
Yeah, and I suppose if you think about it, the structure that Cruyff put into place was adopted by Guardiola and so many players. It influenced so many players who went on to become coaches. Okay, good. I enjoyed that. I'll skip that. Okay, so I think this is an excellent slide. I've taken this from another one. I'm not saying this looks great, but the other visual I had was a little bit blurry. So you as a coach will impact more young people in a year than the average person does in a lifetime, which is incredible. And as great as that sounds, it's quite daunting as well, if you think of it, because there's so much good we could do within that year, but equally, if we don't do things in the right way, we could also do a little bit of harm. If our coaching philosophy, and as people mentioned earlier, our values and beliefs are not aligned, and we'll discuss that as we go on. But I think that's a very powerful slide. But I think we just need to be mindful of the situation we're in and the duty of care we've got to nurture and develop the people we're working with. And we're not just talking about, as I said earlier, kicking the ball around a football pitch. What are those people like who are inside of those football kits? What's the person like? What are they like with their teammates? What are they like at decision making? You know, are they committed? Are they confident? Are they getting challenged in the right way? Are they being allowed to make decisions? Are they just being moved around the pitch like little Sputio pieces? So I think it's important that we can have a huge impact, and hopefully a majority will be a positive impact. Good. So values and beliefs, somebody mentioned it earlier. So whatever our values and beliefs are, that's going to influence and shape the behaviours of our coaching philosophy. We're going to have certain beliefs, we're going to have certain values, and that's more likely been instilled into us by parents, by teachers, by grandparents, by experiences. And his values and beliefs earlier about not being allowed to play football at a young age will have shaped things that he does now because of the way that he was treated. My values and beliefs were shaped massively by parenting, and I didn't really appreciate most of it at the time because I was young and a teenager and thought more likely I knew best. And I'd imagine the majority of what I do now is exactly the type of thing that my parents did with me. So I'm thankful for them for instilling values and beliefs in me, and there's certain things that I will do and there's certain things I won't do no matter what, because you've got principles, you've got morals, and we can go as deep as we like with it, but that will shape our behaviours in everyday life. So a question for everybody: what would your closest family, friends, colleagues say about you? Give us two things in the chat box that you think would be the two things that the closest people to you would say about you. What sums you up?
Bearing in mind it's being recorded, people as well.
Bearing in mind it's being recorded. So what sums you up? I've not actually asked this question to anybody yet. Not on here anyway.
Craig just said you don't think you can repeat them. Dan, just whilst we're waiting, Dan Worthington just said really liking this format, and saying about obviously hopefully we do a level 2 to 3, which we spoke about before. So yeah, be patient. We'll be coming. Likely we'll do something in June around that.
Dan, while you're on here, I will be contacting everybody on that course soon.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
So Andy Carter said honest and trustworthy.
Excellent.
Which is great. Dan said it depends what day of the week. Mo, enthusiasm and passionate. Phil said his own 10-year-old boy just said demanding and competitive. I think that might be a live response we've had there.
Sounds like Pep.
Yeah. Nick Martin, football is Nick's life now. I can probably guess which family member that was. Kev Ward, friendly and approachable. Max, loyal and hardworking. Patient and fair, says Peter. Lawrence, you want to pick up a couple of those?
Yeah, so Danny's mentioned he'd like to think that those close to him would say that he's reliable and supportive, as good as his word. Andrew has actually said he finds it difficult to analyse himself, but he knows Andy Carter well and would say he is passionate and persistent. Mark Gordon, loyal and childish. Thanks, Mark.
Brilliant.
Craig said dedicated and passionate. A lot of passionate. So Ben as well, passionate and high expectations. Martin's mentioned patient and fun.
Brilliant.
Excellent. Keep them coming in, guys, while we move on, because I know that I'm going to run over time. We will be staying on the line after the webinar finishes to field any Q&A. So don't feel that if we're not answering questions as we go on that we're not going to try and field as many as we can later. Okay. So I've just put that out there. That is a definition of a philosophy. I'm not going to read through it. You can read through that. I think the bottom line really sums it up for me. Just a system of values, beliefs, behaviours by which one lives and operates. And they're constant. They don't change. There might be things around those things that are malleable, flexible, but that's us. Okay, so a couple of examples of a philosophy. I'm not saying that this is right. I'm not saying it's wrong, but I'm just showing you two different philosophies. So Barcelona's philosophy, winning the largest amount of possible titles with attractive football, with the greatest amount of possible players trained at the club. I've just taken this verbatim, okay? So maybe it doesn't make a lot of sense to us, some of the phrasing and grammar. The team is more important than the player. The players have an obligation to meet and defend the idea of the club. I think the second one up is quite prevalent when Guardiola went into managing the Barcelona team after he managed the B team. And the first thing he did was got rid of 3 players because he knew that he couldn't achieve what he wanted to achieve with those 3 players. One of them was Ronaldinho, one of them was Deco. I don't know if the other one was Eto'o or not, but they was pretty much the party animals of the group, and he knew that they would be distracted to the other members of the team who he felt would be, they was the ones that the majority of the team left were the ones that had come through the system, and they were Barcelona players essentially, and he knew that they would disrupt that. So the first thing he did was just said that you're not going to play for me, which I thought was quite interesting. So that's the England DNA. So the who we are. So proud to be part of the development of an England winning culture, striving for the highest standards on and off the field, and nothing else is acceptable. Again, these are elite cultures, elite philosophies. But I think that you can take from Barcelona's philosophy, the FA philosophy, and look at the format of it. So if we was going to develop a philosophy, it hasn't got to be, copious notes. It can be bullet points. This is what we stand for. Why do we exist? What are we going to do going forward? What are we not going to do going forward? What's the acceptables? What's not acceptable? I think they're the things that we need to think about when we're developing a philosophy. And some of that will come very easily. Some of that we might have to think about. Think about who we involve in that. Is it just the adults that develop that philosophy? Do we give the players a voice to try and see what they want from a philosophy of a club or a team? Because I think they can set some boundaries for themselves as well. So I think it's good to have a chat with the players as well and see what they think. Because I don't think sometimes we give them the credit that they deserve. Okay. So I'm only going to spend 2 minutes gathering some information from you guys around, think about philosophy, consider those 4 headings. So we've got how we play strengths areas for development, player development, and how we coach. And there's going to be some subtext underneath that. So what do those 4 headings mean to you? So if you was going to populate those 4 areas, what types of things might you put in there? So just 2 minutes, and then we're gonna look at that and hopefully pull some things out of it once we've done that.
Gary, just while
Yes.
we're working, Martin King said that he's happy for us just to share just a little extract, kind of snippet from his project. I'm happy to read it out, or I can share it on the screen. I've got it ready if you want, but it might just be relevant to what we're talking about here.
Okay.
So do you want me just to read it out?
Yeah, go on, mate.
So he's just done this under, it was whilst it's here in front of me. So it's part of the level 2 project. I won't go into loads of detail, but one of the elements is kind of outlining your approach, philosophy, whatever you want to put, your ethos, as well as your club or the organisation you work with. So under the sort of how we coach section, if I just take a couple of examples, which might just be a bit of food for thought, I suppose. So it's Martin King from Essex Royals.
Yeah.
So under the how we coach, he said the players at the centre of everything we do, which is obviously goes back to some of the points that we've been speaking about already, doesn't it?
Yes, indeed.
We aim for at least 70% of training to be with the ball rolling. So ball rolling time might be familiar to quite a few of you. We encourage appropriate playing time in matches for all players.
Yeah.
And then just one of the other ones that stood out for me was we utilise age-appropriate practices and training methods. I think that's key. So there's obviously a hell of a lot of content out there, and it can be quite a challenge to sift through it all. And the danger is just copying a lot of that stuff, isn't it? I know it's discussion that we had previously, but I think age appropriate is something that always jumps out. So that might just kind of get a bit of the thinking going for some of you.
Yeah, that's good. Cheers, Martin. We got anything in there yet, guys?
Not at the moment, no. Not related to what's on screen.
Okay, I'm going to move on.
Cool.
So if we look at how we play, what would you like the team and players to be able to do both in and out of possession? I think that needs to change and say, what would you and the players like the team to be able to do, rather than you like the team to be able to do. So I think it's about when we've got the ball, what's our aims, and bring the players into that conversation as well, because they may feel that they need to develop in certain areas. So I think we need that two-way dialogue, rather than saying, I think you should do this, I think you should do that. Get some dialogue going with them, get them to make some decisions, get them to be a little bit more analytical about where they are with their game, and how maybe they could get a little bit better, which links with the next bit. So what can my players currently do? I say my players, the players, what can they currently do? What can't they do? So I think it's really important to, rather than just look at players who may be making mistakes in certain circumstances, what's the reasons they may be making mistakes in certain areas of the field, trying to do certain things? Where do they need developing? What's their strengths? What's their areas for development? What's their strengths? How can I make their strengths a super strength? So it's not just a case of maybe thinking about what they can't do, but think about what they do very well also. And that's not only technically. So everything we're talking about in the first two, we're saying about in possession. Okay, so people might think, well, how are we going to play out from the back? Well, included in playing out from the back is decision making. Included in playing out from the back is movement, speed of movement, angle of movement. So it comes into the physical corner. So again, it links into supporting players going forward. But it's all integral anyway. With regards to player development, what's the player development program that we might have in place at the moment? What's the player development program that we can put in place going forward after we've identified what the players' needs and wants are, to help them become better, to help them and to assist them to get to a place that they want to be, as well as we want them to be. So I think that's important as well. So not just necessarily working on a practice because we want to work on a practice. Is this practice specific for developing those players in those areas that we've said that we need to develop them? So I think that's massively important as well. And then what are you going to do to help the players achieve this? So yes, one thing might be to put a session on, plan a session, facilitate it and review it. But then what other things are we going to do to help develop the players? Are we going to have some dialogue with the players? Are we going to find out if they're not playing that well, why are they not playing that well? How are they actually feeling today? Do we know how they feel when they turn up for training? Do we care how they feel when they turn up for training? If somebody's having a bad day, there may be an underlying reason why they're having a bad day. Or it could be they've played really well, and why do they think they've played really well? How was they feeling today? Why do they think they played better today than they did last week? Was there any reason? I think we have to get on a personal level with our players. And it goes back to showing that, you know, we care about our players. So think about those four elements. Think about maybe what we do already. And I know full well, you know, we do some great stuff. Can we make what we do even better? Think about how that links to your philosophy. So again, it's not necessarily, you know, if we've said we're making sure our players have equal playing time, then we make sure they have equal playing time. But while they're having that equal playing time, what's the areas they need to develop in? How can I tweak my practices to be specific for certain players? How can I individualise it? Guys, if you've got any questions on that, put them in the chat box and we can pick them up a little bit later. If anybody wants to stay on the line and ask a specific question around that, then feel free to do so. I'd like to explore that with others as well.
There's one.
Sorry, go on, mate.
No, that's right. There's one here from Andrew Hollands, just on the how we play section.
Okay.
So I've worked hard with my lads to recognise the transition in and out of possession when still marking the same player. For example, from getting tight to your man to losing him and marking the space. So maybe going into a little bit more technical detail with individuals there.
So it depends on what age.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Because at certain ages, the players just won't do it because they don't react quickly enough.
No, I think somebody mentioned it earlier about how you phrase it. So Andrew's just said they're under 16, so straight away you think,
okay,
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Someone mentioned it earlier, the sort of language, I suppose it's football lingo, jargon, I think was mentioned earlier on. That's key, something just always to reflect on is, sort of once you said it, or think before you speak, I suppose, is probably not a bad one. It's just we all like to go in with what we feel is right and sounds right, and perhaps was something that we were coached, but
I think we can. So what was the question again, or the observation again?
So the observation was I worked hard with my lads to recognise the transition in and out of possession.
Yeah.
Still marking the same man. For example, from getting tight to your man to losing him and marking the space.
Yeah. So really, it is just about persevering and working on that for a period of time in maybe different practices, and challenge the players to actually react to the ball changing hands, because they won't do it naturally. And also, if we lose possession, it's much easier. I mean, when I played, I'd sooner run forward towards the opponent's goal than backwards towards mine, because that's more interesting. So it's trying to make it more enjoyable and more rewarding, to actually, want to defend more effectively. But also, if we create that culture where we're helping our mates out, if I don't react and do my job, I'm leaving my mate in trouble. So it's creating a culture, a club culture, and a team culture. And my mate would do that for me if I needed them to. Yeah. And that is far wider reaching than just stepping on a football pitch and doing those bits.
Ben Pratt's come in, Gary, and just asked which age group. So he said this is under 13s. He says, I think we've worked out how we play, but we're looking at how we work around the development of the player, given that ours are at different levels and have different aspirations. Probably one of the biggest challenges and probably one of the most regular questions we get on courses, would you say, Gary, about differentiating?
Yeah, I mean, I think the how we play is an ideal, isn't it? But so we'd like to play in this way. When we've got the ball, we'd like to do this. When we haven't got the ball, we'd like to revert to this and deny certain spaces. But we know full well that it's not a given that that's going to happen, because we're playing against opposition who we can't predict how they're going to do things. So we may want to do things in a certain way, but if the opposition do this, we might have to do something different. Now, if the players haven't done enough of that work around scenarios, the what ifs, so we planned for this, but the opposition's done this. Now we haven't planned for that, so now we don't really know what we're meant to do. And you can't possibly plan for every permutation. So there will be things that we do that just don't work, but that's all part of our learning, both as players and as coaches. But that then gives us something else to work on. So I don't want to go too deeply into the how we play bit, because I think there's far more to this than the how we play bit. And also that comes up again, on another workshop. So we can really go into some different detail on that. But some really good questions and observations. So just a bit down there, guys, about if we want tactically adaptable decision makers who are responsible for themselves, then how are we going to behave to achieve this? So I think it's massively important that we put our players in situations where they work things out. going back to the player that I was talking about earlier, the senior player who'd never been asked to solve a problem in all the time that he played, because the coach always told him what to do, is mind-blowing as far as I'm concerned. And I think that's, if we think back, if you've been coaching a while now, and we think back to how we started coaching, and I was that coach. You know, I'm not ashamed to say that, because I didn't know what I know now. And like people say, you know, you don't know what you don't know. So I would virtually be moving players about on the pitch, telling them where to go, when to go, how to go. So therefore, they don't have to make any decisions. And then I'd still more likely moan when they didn't do it right. So it's ludicrous to think that I worked in that way, but hopefully, you know, people have come on leaps and bounds since then. But I know full well, as much as there's some excellent coaches out there now, and partly down to, you know, the coach education courses, I know full well that there's still coaches out there who was doing what I did 25, 27 years ago, which is for different reasons, you know. But there you go. That's for another workshop. Good stuff. Okay. So this is the person I was talking about, guys. John Wooden, who was a university college basketball coach, and in a 12-year span won 10 titles. Now, he obviously knew about basketball. He knew about the tech, the X and O's, whatever you want to call it. However, he had some great life lessons, some excellent principles, some values, some beliefs. So I've got 3 slides that sort of sum him up. So there's just some quotes there that he's come up with. I won't read through them, and it's just for you to sort of have a look at, take in. Everybody will be getting this slide deck, so if you're on the other end of your laptop taking copious photographs, then don't worry about it, because you'll get the slide deck. So that's the first slide around John Wooden. I heard something, a podcast the other day, and somebody said, they was talking about John Wooden, and somebody said they went to a seminar in America, and this old boy came up to a young coach and said, introduced himself. Well, he didn't introduce himself, he just said, hello, would you mind doing me a favour and taking some notes on this seminar? It was part of a seminar. And the guy said to him, are you John Wooden? And he said, yeah. He said, well, why do you want me to take notes? He said, because I want to learn something from this. And that really sums up somebody with a very open mind and a great growth mindset. That we never get to a stage where we know everything. And I think the more, well, certainly from my point of view, the more I know, the more I know I don't know. There's so much more out there that I could learn, given time. So I always immerse myself in information. Okay, next slide. So this is a pyramid of success that John Wooden came up with. So I'll put them all up, and you can have a quick look at them. And then hopefully some of these will resonate with you. Some of these may actually align to what you believe in. Some of you might look at them and not agree with them, which you're quite at liberty to do. I personally find these quite inspiring. And to be perfectly honest, there's nothing there to say, I'm going to go out and try and win everything. It's all about developing a team culture, a team cohesiveness, a team equality and equity. And from that comes everything else. And I just think it's a superb visual, which you will have. Okay.
Gary, just a quick time check. We just literally just
Yeah.
clicked over 7:30, so there might be one or two that need to get off or whatever. But you're more than welcome, obviously, to shoot off whenever you like, because we are recording the last few minutes anyway, so it'll all be sent out and shared, guys.
Yeah, I've only got a couple more slides. Bear with me.
No problem.
Okay, so just lessons in leadership. And again, 12 different lines. Each of those really powerful. So good values attract good people. Emotion is your enemy. So a lot of us spoke about, and I speak about passion on a regular basis. How does that passion show itself is one thing I'd more likely say. So I think that years ago we perceived in British football that passionate was getting stuck in and running up and down the line, beating your chest and things like that. I think now passion is trying to do the best you can possibly do all of the time to the best of your ability whenever you can. That's passion. Passion is trying to do something as professional as you can. So if we can take the emotion out of it and we can just be as good as we can possibly be, you're showing a passion in coaching or playing football. It's like our players never walk out on the pitch and go, I'm not going to play very well, I don't really fancy it. Most of our players will go out there going, I want to really try and do well today. Make each day your masterpiece really resonates with me. So whatever we're going to do today, can we do it to the best of our ability? And then at the end of the day, if we can say that we've done everything to the best of our ability, we can't do any more than that. And some days that might not be enough to get what we want out of that day or that game or that training session. But next week we've got another game or we've got another training session. So it's not too much of a drama because there's always another one to come along. Okay, good. So it'd be really good to get your thoughts on this evening's webinar, everybody. I think I certainly value your feedback. I know that the County FA will value any feedback. A couple of people said about the format, about it's quite an appealing format. So it'd be nice to get your thoughts. Certainly, if you want to populate the chat box with some of your thoughts now, great. If not, send them through to Andy or Lawrence or email myself just with some feedback. And all I like to do is, Andy Carter, I spoke to you earlier. Just to finish off with, would you just share some of your journey with the others on here regarding your level 2 and just really the key messages that you took from it and how it maybe changed you from how you was as a coach to how you are now as a coach, and maybe the impact that had on others around you?
Yeah, okay, I shall try. I think, as I said at the beginning, not coming from a playing background was perhaps once considered a hindrance. And I think over the course of the level 2, what it has given me is reinforced self-confidence that that's no longer a hindrance. So one of the things I took out of the level 2 personally was probably the self-confidence to stay true to my beliefs. I used the project a lot to really define what I understood to be my philosophy, what I understood to mean what it is I stand for and why it is I coach. And as we've spoken about tonight, part of that is is certainly influenced by, you know, maybe some poor experiences that I've had personally. As part of this, I did actually ask my wife what she had seen in the difference in my coaching. Now, you know, trying to encourage maybe a bit of self-reflection and get some feedback from her. She doesn't get to see me deliver the sessions, but she gets to see the planning. She gets to see the reflection and the review of the sessions, and she also gets to see how I can be quite stressed out between sessions, especially when there's a man from the FA with a clipboard coming to sign me off. But her words, and they really resonated with me when she said it, like, you know, to me, you know, recently, was she felt that she had observed that I was now much more focused on the individual players as opposed to the team. And whilst that's always been in my nature to really try and look after individuals and look after everybody, you know, the level 2 has really helped in that approach, to the point where she said I'm in tune with the individuals, and, you know, I look at them, the individual players, I look at their needs individually, I look at what motivates them, I try to understand their personalities, and I take time out to really try and, you know, understand what makes them tick. And it really summed up what it says, that I now build a team that best fits them, as opposed to trying to make them best fit into a team of what I think it should look like. She went on to comment that she's heard via the parent line how parents have commented how good it is that I find the time, either at the pitch or away from it, to really listen to their children and to try and understand them. And they've commented how they have seen as parents improvements in self-confidence and improvements even in school behaviour, which they're attributing to the footballing environment. You know, I'll take that every day of the week. Over a match win, over a cup final, or whatever. Their life skills that these lads and my players are hopefully taken out of, you know, what I'm doing with them. I would say the level 2 journey has been supplemented along the way by, you know, the FA club mentor. That when we as a club at Essex Royals got to see and got to work with Ian Fleming, it really illustrates what good can look like. A bit like when you go on the courses that you run, Gary, or that, you know, Andy, and you know, you get to see what good looks like. When I saw a CPD event that Pete Sturgis ran, and you think, no, mine never looked like that. You know, I've got more cones than the M1 motorway, and yeah. I'm confused even by looking at them. So, you know, seeing what good looks like by the use of the club mentor really inspired me to want to be good myself and want to be the best that I could be for the kids that I'm coaching. You know, it's not an ego thing from my side. I want them to achieve the best that they can possibly be themselves as individuals, but within the context of the team that we're coaching.
Yeah.
So that's what it's meant to me. I don't know if that's what you were looking for.
No, that's over and above what I was looking for, to be honest, Andy. That's excellent, and it's certainly great from my point of view, you know, in my role, to know that this is the impact of the course, or can be the impact of the course, and everybody will take something, you know, different out of the course. But it's great to hear, you know, what you've got out of it, but also what the players are getting from it. You know, it's great that you're getting that, but to be perfectly honest, you're not the important one, are you? And you know that yourself.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
it's the players, it's the parents, it's the life skills, social skills, decision making skills that's going to stand those players in good stead going forward, being citizens, holding down jobs, friendships, being part of a team, etc., etc. Parents recognising that school behaviours change, hopefully from that school work changes. And these are things that can come from sport. And it's not just football. It happens to be, in this case, football was the vehicle. But I think hopefully whatever sport children and the path they choose, they find a coach that brings that out for them. From my point of view, we work in football. We could be working in another sport. I don't know what a lot of other sports do, but I'd like to find out more about other sports at youth level. But there's some really powerful messages there, mate, and I really appreciate you sharing that with everybody, and I would imagine that resonates quite well with the people that are attending this as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark,